The morning heat shimmered above the sand berms like glass. Sarah Martinez knelt at the 500-yard line, Almia still marked with the faint dust of paper targets. The air smelled faintly of salt and gun cone oil, a scent she'd grown used to after 8 months working part-time at the Oceanside Range. Somewhere behind her, a group of Navy SEALs were running long-range drills. Their voices carried across the open lot, clipped and tired. It was the Saturday before the 4th of July, the busiest weekend of the year. And Sarah had been there since dawn, moving back and forth between targets while the sun climbed. She didn't mind the work. It paid for textbooks and rent. Still, she'd learned to keep her head down around the military groups. They preferred range staff, invisible. She paused to drink the last of her lukewarm coffee. Steam rose briefly in the morning light before fading into the wind. A gull's cry echoed off the cliffs. Then came a sharp, frustrated shout. "I'm telling you, something's wrong with this rifle." Sarah turned. One of the younger SEALs, Rodriguez, had stepped back from his shooting mat. His rounds had missed the target completely, and irritation bled into every movement. "Sir, the rifle's off. It keeps pulling." Chief Petty Officer Jake Sullivan, older, quieter, studied him without a word. The rest of the team smirked, whispering. Sarah could see it from her angle, the way Rodriguez jerked the trigger, the tension in his shoulders. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Patience is a form of aim, mija. Don't fight the shot." She knew she shouldn't say anything. Civilians didn't correct SEALs. But watching him blame the weapon, the way his ego fought the lesson, something inside her refused to stay silent. "The rifle's fine," she said, almost too quietly. "You're pulling your shots left." The sound of brass rolling on concrete was the only response for a second. Then every head turned toward her. 8 men in matching tan uniforms, frozen mid-motion. Sarah's cheeks flared. "Excuse me," Rodriguez said, voice sharp. "You're anticipating recoil," she managed. "That's why you're missing." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Jake's gaze found her calm, assessing. "You think you can do better?" he asked. His tone wasn't cruel, just steady, like someone testing a wire to see if it would hold. Sarah hesitated. She wasn't military. She replaced paper targets and swept brass. But her father had taught her to never make a claim she couldn't back up. She nodded once. Jake gave a small nod to one of his men. The SEAL handed him the rifle, the same one Rodriguez had cursed a moment earlier. Jake checked the chamber, then offered it to her. "Range is clear," he said. "Show us." The rifle gleamed beneath the California sun heat waves dancing around the barrel. Sarah took it carefully, the way she used to handle her father's old service rifle. The metal felt warm, almost alive, not a weapon, but a kind of memory. "She's really gonna shoot one," SEAL muttered. "Guess we'll find out another," replied, half amused. Sarah set her feet, adjusted her cheek to the unfamiliar stock. The world narrowed, wind flag, target breath. Her pulse slowed. She could almost hear her father again. Exhale, halfway, squeeze. Don't snatch the moment. She fired. The crack echoed across the sand. Through the spotting scope, Jake blinked once, then looked up at her. "Dead center," he said simply. Rodriguez's jaw tensed. "Do it again," he murmured. She did. Then once more. 3 holes touching. Perfect. The team fell silent. Sarah lowered the rifle, breathing unsteady now that the focus had left her. Jake approached, stopping just short of arm's length. "Name Sarah Martinez." "Well, Martinez," he said. "That's one way to start a Saturday." He gave the faintest hint of a smile, respect disguised as curiosity, before turning to his men. "Reset the line. We'll run it again." Sarah stepped back, heart racing, unsure whether she'd just made a friend an enemy or something stranger. Behind her the gulls circled, and the faint sound of a coffee machine hissed from the range office. Still, she couldn't help smiling. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of the ocean and burnt powder. Jake Sullivan stood a few yards away, his expression unreadable, as he ran a practiced hand along the rifle's barrel. The men behind him had gone quiet, waiting to see what their senior would do next. Sarah stood still, her gloves tucked into her back pocket, the morning sun turning the range dust gold. "All right, Martinez," Jake said finally, voice even. "You hit that target, lunch is on me. You miss well, you explain to my CO why a civilian's firing Navy weapons." A ripple of laughter passed through the line. Sarah felt her throat tighten but nodded. "Understood, Chief." Jake glanced at her hands. "You know the platform, not this model, sir? But the principles don't change." He gave a short hum, impressed but not showing it. Then he turned the rifle in his hands, checking the chamber one last time. "Clear and cold. Let's see what you've got." He extended the weapon toward her, a slow, deliberate gesture. The sunlight caught on the metal, scattering tiny flares of light. For a heartbeat, Sarah saw her father's hands instead, steady brown, worn from years of service guiding hers when she was 12. "Discipline is patience under pressure, Mija. You master your breath before you master the trigger." She took the rifle. It was heavier than she remembered from childhood, yet it felt balanced, like something that wanted to be steady if she let it. The buttstock pressed against her shoulder, grounding her. "You comfortable?" Jake asked. "Yes, sir." "Then breathe. Range is yours." Sarah settled into position. The sand crunched beneath her elbows as she lay prone adjusting the bipod legs. Through the scope, the target shimmered in the morning heat, a small white square against endless blue. Rodriguez muttered behind her, "If she misses, we'll be eating dinner on her paycheck." Jake didn't look back. "You'd better hope she doesn't." Sarah ignored them. She focused on the wind flag, then the mirage. Her breath came slow, rhythmic time to the crash of distant waves. The world shrank to the steady pulse in her fingertips. She inhaled. Exhaled. "Relax your grip," she whispered. Jake, kneeling beside her, raised an eyebrow. "That's not how we do it." "Maybe it should be," she said quietly. He didn't respond, but she saw the faintest flicker of respect pass across his face. Her finger found the trigger straight smooth, no tension. "Stillness is aim," her father used to say. "The target isn't out there. It's inside your calm." She exhaled halfway, holding the breath. "Fire when ready, Martinez," Jake said, voice low, almost a dare. Sarah squeezed. The rifle cracked a clean, sharp sound that rolled down the range like thunder. She didn't move, didn't breathe until the echo faded. Jake lifted the spotting scope. For a long second he said nothing. Then impact 1 inch high, left of center. Rodriguez swore softly. "No way." Jake kept watching her, tone neutral. "Correct your wind call, Martinez." She made a tiny adjustment, half mil right, nothing more. Then settled again. The sand felt cooler now under her palms. "On you," Jake said. The second shot landed. Through the scope, a puff of dust bloomed precisely where she aimed. Jake's lips pressed into something like a smile. "That's better." "Told you," she murmured, unable to hide the hint of satisfaction. He lowered the scope, standing. "Pack it up, gentlemen. We're buying her lunch." Behind him, the team broke into low laughter, half teasing, half impressed. Sarah stood brushing sand from her knees. The rifle gleamed faintly in her hands, less a weapon now, more like a bridge between worlds. She handed it back to Jake, who received it with a small nod. "Good shot," he said. "And good lesson." What lesson's that? Sometimes the quiet one's right. She smiled, uncertain whether to thank him or apologize. Instead, she turned toward the line of fresh targets waiting to be replaced. The wind tugging at her ponytail. Still, she could feel his gaze follow her, curious, thoughtful. The world seemed to contract into a single sound, the clean break of a trigger. Sarah's finger barely moved yet. The rifle spoke with perfect precision. The recoil pressed into her shoulder, not as violence, but as confirmation. Through the scope, she saw the faint puff of dust bloom at the exact center of the paper target. A perfect strike. The wind paused as if to listen. One Jake said quietly, eye to the spotting scope. Sarah cycled the bolt smoothly, the motion as natural as breathing. The next shot followed steady, unhurried. 2. Another breath, another clean break. 3. Then silence. No one moved. No one even exhaled. The sound of waves rolled up from the cliffs below, soft against the stunned quiet of the range. Jake lowered the scope slowly. 3 shots, 2 inches center mass. Rodriguez blinked. That's impossible. Jake didn't answer. He just turned the faintest crease of surprise between his brows. Sarah lifted her head, blinking against the glare. The rifle lay quiet in her hands, its barrel catching a line of sunlight, like it was holding the day's breath. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" Jake asked. Sarah hesitated, fingers brushing the stock. "My father taught me." Gunnery Sergeant Miguel Martinez, retired. The older SEAL Webb straightened. "Gunny Martinez. You knew him." "He trained half the Marines I served with," Webb said. "They called him the surgeon. Said he could diagnose a miss faster than anyone alive." A low whistle ran through the group. Respect replaced the earlier smirks. Sarah lowered the rifle carefully, setting it down as though it were something sacred. "He always said shooting wasn't about the target. It's about what kind of person you are when you pull the trigger." Jake studied her for a long moment. He was right. The words carried weight, not praise, but acknowledgement, one professional recognizing another. Behind them, the sea breeze stirred again, carrying the smell of salt and cut grass. The metallic targets downrange glinted, as if nodding approval. "Guess I owe you lunch," Jake said at last. Sarah smiled faintly. "You don't have to." "No, ma'am," he said, half-smile returning. "Deal's a deal." Rodriguez stepped closer, sheepish now. "Ma'am." "I was way out of line earlier." "You weren't," she replied gently. "You just needed a different view." He nodded, awkward but sincere. Around them, the rest of the team began to pack up, but the energy had changed, quieter, more respectful. Sarah looked back at the target. 3 holes tight enough to be one. The sun caught the metal frame, and for a moment it glowed. Symbolic imagery, sunlight, eel recognition. She didn't know it yet, but that shot those 3 would echo further than this range. Jake turned toward her again, crossing his arms. "You ever thought about teaching you diagnose problems faster than some of my instructors? That's not luck." She laughed softly. "I'm a nursing student, Chief. I teach patients how to breathe, not soldiers." Maybe it's the same lesson he said. Patience under pressure. His words lingered as the wind picked up again, rippling the spent targets. Sarah looked toward the sea, its horizon glimmering like a promise. Stillness settled over the range, not silence, but the kind that follows truth. Jake's voice, calm but curious. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" The question hung in the air like a challenge she hadn't yet answered. The air had shifted. The mocking laughter from earlier was gone, replaced by a stillness that hummed beneath the sunlight. Even the waves seemed to slow as a black sedan rolled to a stop beside the range office. A man in crisp navy dress blues stepped out Commander Harrison. His posture alone silenced the group. Jake straightened instinctively, his men following suit. At ease, the commander said, though his eyes scanned the firing line with practiced precision. "Chief Sullivan, report." Jake stepped forward. Sir, training session proceeded as planned with some unplanned assistance. He motioned towards Sarah, who stood a few paces back, dust on her boots and a borrowed earplug cord still looped around her neck. "Assistance?" Harrison asked. "Yes, sir." Miss Martinez corrected one of my shooter's fundamentals, then demonstrated. 3-shot group 2-inch spread center mass. The commander raised an eyebrow. "With our rifle?" "Yes, sir." He looked at Sarah now, and she felt the weight of his scrutiny, calm and exacting. "And what's your background?" "Miss Martinez, civilian, sir." "Nursing student." "My father's a retired Marine gunnery sergeant, Miguel Martinez." Recognition flickered in the commander's eyes. Gunny Martinez trained some of our best scout snipers before his injury. He paused, softening. "You have his steadiness." Sarah lowered her gaze slightly. "He taught me to respect the craft, sir. To never blame the tool, only the technique." The commander's lips curved into something between a smile and an order. "Well said." He turned to Jake. "Chief, your thoughts?" Jake hesitated, then looked at Sarah again. This time not as a subordinate, not even as a civilian. As an equal. "Sir, she's got an instinct you can't train. She doesn't just shoot, she understands." The commander nodded once, slow and deliberate. "Then give credit where it's due." The instruction seemed simple, but its meaning rang through the air. Jake took a step toward Sarah. The sunlight flashed across the steel of the rifle in his hands. The team watched, unmoving, uncertain of what they were witnessing. Then Jake did something no one expected. He stood tall, squared his shoulders, and raised his right hand in a short, respectful salute. The motion was precise, economical, the kind used only among peers. Sarah blinked, startled. "Chief, you've earned this more than I did today," Jake said quietly. He extended the rifle to her, his rifle. The one marked with his service tape and faded initials along the stock. Sarah hesitated, then accepted it with both hands. The metal was warm, the light catching it until it glowed bronze beneath the morning sun. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to bow out, carrying only the salt air and the distant cry of gulls. The commander stood, watching, his face unreadable. Then slowly he gave a small nod. A silent acknowledgement, one professional to another. Rodriguez swallowed hard. His earlier arrogance had drained away, replaced by something close to reverence. "She really earned it," he whispered. Jake's salute fell, but the respect stayed in his eyes. "You taught my men something today, Martinez. About humility, about focus." Sarah's throat tightened. "And you taught me something too, Chief. About listening and about letting others prove themselves." He smiled faintly. "Guess that's fair trade." The commander cleared his throat softly. "Miss Martinez, if you're open to it, I'd like to see you assist in our next session." "Off the record." "Yes, sir," she said, her voice steady now. "It'd be an honor." The commander nodded again, satisfied. Then, that settled. He turned toward the sea hands clasped behind his back, while the range stood still, a tableau of quiet recognition beneath the California sun. Sarah glanced down at the rifle, not a weapon anymore, but a story of respect exchanged in silence. The ocean wind brushed past her cheek. 3 days later, the wind at Oceanside carried the faint smell of coffee and gun oil, again the scent of routine. But this morning felt different. The range no longer hummed with tension. It hummed with quiet respect. Sarah arrived early, just as the flag on the pole began to rise with the first light. She carried her usual clipboard and gloves, but tucked under her arm was something new, the rifle Jake had handed her. From the shooting benches, familiar voices called out, "Morning, Coach." She turned startled. Rodriguez grinned sheepishly, adjusting his sling. "You're gonna hate me for asking, but can you check my grip again?" Sarah smiled, soft and amused. "It's not the rifle that misses Rodriguez, it's the rush." He chuckled. "Yeah, I get that now." Jake stepped up beside them, mug of black coffee in hand. The steam curled against the rising sun. "Don't let him off easy, Coach Martinez. Man still blames the wind when he's nervous." "I only blame the wind when it changes." Chief Rodriguez shot back, "Then learn to read it before it changes," Sarah said, settling the rifle on the bench. Her movements were calm, deliberate, the same patient rhythm her father used when teaching her. Around them, the SEALs watched with relaxed curiosity rather than suspicion. The same men who once rolled their eyes now leaned in to listen. Sarah knelt, adjusting Rodriguez's elbow, lowering his shoulder. "See, stability starts here. Everything else follows." He nodded, eyes fixed on the target. "Like breathing." "Exactly." She stood, brushing sand from her jeans. The California breeze tugged at her hair, carrying laughter from the far lane where two younger SEALs were competing for tightest group. Jake sipped his coffee, tilting his head toward her. "You know, next time you should charge tuition." Sarah laughed softly, the sound unguarded, almost musical. "I'll just take coffee. Easier to collect. Then I owe you a lifetime supply." The moment hung between them, easy and warm. Behind them, the radio from the range office crackled to life, its signal slightly fuzzy, but clear enough to carry an old familiar song, "Stand By Me." Someone hummed along, off-key but earnest. Sarah leaned against the table, eyes on the sea beyond the targets. The sun reflected off the metal racks, glinting like a line of medals. "You ever miss the quiet, Chief?" she asked. "Every day," Jake said. "But sometimes you find it again in people who remind you what it's for." She glanced at him, smiling. "Guess we both found it here." The conversation drifted into silence. Sarah took one last look at the rifle before packing it away. It no longer felt borrowed. It felt like a continuation, proof that recognition could become responsibility. As she turned to leave, Rodriguez called out again. "Coach!" She paused. "Thanks for the lesson." Again, Sarah raised her mug in salute. "Keep your breathing steady, Rodriguez." Jake watched her walk toward the lot, the morning light turning her silhouette gold against the range. The echo of laughter and distant waves followed her, gentle as applause. Jake's quiet voice under the radio hum. "Guess some legacies fire truer than others." The sun was lower now, slipping toward the horizon in slow gold arcs. The range looked quieter in late August, half-empty benches, a faint haze above the sand, and the tired flutter of the flag near the gate. Sarah wiped her hands on a rag and locked the equipment shed for the last time. Her summer job had stretched longer than planned, and this was her final shift. The thought brought both relief and a small ache, endings always did. The distant crunch of tires on gravel made her turn. A dark pickup rolled up beside the firing line. Jake stepped out, still in uniform, still carrying himself with that calm steadiness that made people straighten when he passed. In his hands, wrapped in a cloth sling, was the rifle. "You didn't have to drive all the way here," Sarah said, smiling. "Figured I owed you one more conversation." He placed the rifle on the bench between them. "It's time for me to step back." Sarah frowned slightly. "You're retiring, transfer technically. Less field work, more teaching. Happens to all of us eventually. He rested his hand on the rifle, the sunlight catching the edge of its worn receiver. But this, he nodded toward the weapon, belongs to someone who reminded me what patience looks like. Sarah swallowed hard, the words catching somewhere between gratitude and disbelief. Chief, I can't. You already did, Jake said, gently pushing it toward her. You earned it more than I did that day. She took it carefully, both hands, steady the metal warm from the sun. In the silence that followed, the ocean murmured in the distance. You know, Jake said quietly, it's funny. You corrected one man's aim, but you changed how the whole team sees the word discipline. Sarah smiled, eyes glistening. I just remembered what my dad taught me, master your calm before you're shot. Good lesson, Jake said. Keep teaching it. A gust of wind moved between them, carrying the faint sound of the AM radio from the office, a low, crackling voice announcing the evening forecast. Jake straightened. Well, Coach Martinez, he said, using the title with deliberate warmth, don't forget us when you move on. I won't, she replied. He nodded once, the same short salute she'd seen him give that morning weeks ago, and took a step back. Sarah stood still, holding the rifle against her chest, feeling its familiar weight anchor her. The horizon burned orange where the sea met the sky. The flag's shadow stretched long across the sand, trembling in the wind. She whispered more to herself than to anyone. Sometimes the loudest respect is silence. The radio faded, and the last light of day brushed the range in bronze. The summer light folded gently over the empty range, the flag's shadow moving slow across the sand. Jake left his footprints behind as he turned toward the sea, the sound of his boots fading beneath the radio's soft hum. Sarah stayed, holding the rifle, the proof of patience, not power, its metal still warm from the sun. Still, the air carried that quiet dignity found only after justice has settled. She set the rifle on the bench, a reflection of bronze and memory, and traced its worn initials like a promise kept. Then softly she smiled. He saluted once and stepped back. The horizon blurred into gold, the radio voice fading with the tide. Sometimes the loudest respect is silence.